Eddie McGuire has fallen from his AFL pedestal and straight onto his sword. In an extraordinary and emotional press conference, McGuire stood down as Collingwood President following that racism storm. And to discuss, we're joined by Nine News reporter Tom Wren and Shelley Horton from Nine Honey. Tom, did this need to happen?
I think so, Layla, and notwithstanding the fact he's had an extraordinary list of achievements, and he went through them in some detail yesterday. It was a 20-minute press conference where he outlined a lot of the things that he had done. He took over a club that was on its knees at the time in the late 90s, and I think in time his legacy will be regarded as one of transforming the Collingwood Football Club back into a real powerhouse. But given everything that has happened over the past few weeks, I think it was absolutely time for him to step aside. There is no doubt about his passion for the football club, but I think sometimes when you've been in a position for that long, it can sometimes cloud your judgment. And I think the time is right for him to step aside and for Collingwood to wipe the slate clean and to step forward now into a new era.
Shelley, we've talked a lot about Eddie this morning, but really this is about the club and the code, isn't it? And making changes that are more inclusive and better for everybody.
Absolutely. And I think, no one likes seeing a person upset like that when they're, leaving a job. And I think that there are many positives that Eddie did bring to Collingwood, but on the flip side, there were so many negatives. I mean, it was on this show 5 years ago that I spoke about the way he was, referring to Caroline Wilson. And from that, I got the worst trolling I've ever experienced in my life, with death threats and rape threats and body shaming. And I kind of still have to say that the fish rots from the head. So it wasn't fixed back then. The racism stuff has added to that. So I think this will be a time for Eddie to actually stop, reflect, maybe learn and understand that gaffes aren't just gaffes. And I think he will definitely bounce back and he will be a huge asset to whoever he joins forces with next.
Well, full credit for commissioning the report and starting to make changes. But let's hope that the code and the clubs can do a better job moving on. Now, Crown Resorts has been deemed unsuitable to operate a new Sydney casino at Barangaroo after a months-long public inquiry. But it can achieve a fresh start, apparently, after this scathing report, if it undertakes radical changes. Tom, it's hard to see how it can survive this, especially without those high rollers that Barangaroo was counting on.
No doubt about it, and Layla, I'm sure you've had a quick look at this report as well. It is damning when you look at the list of violations, some 19 recommendations coming out. I mean, changes have to be made. We've just been speaking about Eddie McGuire. This report recommending that the CEO be punted. I mean, some of the transgressions that have occurred are simply unforgivable in many ways. So absolutely, it's difficult to see how they can operate moving forward, and it's going to make it very, very difficult for Crown. But I think changes, again, have to be made here from the top down, and it's the culture that starts from the top. And if those at that level didn't know what was happening, they should have. So I think, these implementations have to be made, and some pretty drastic changes also have to be made going forward.
Yeah, in other news this morning, and just a warning that this vision may be distressing, a video has emerged of a Year 7 student being bashed, allegedly by her classmate. It's got New South Wales parents pushing for violent pupils to be separated to their own specialist schools. We asked our viewers at home what they think. 74% these bullies should be moved into separate schools. Danielle says, yes, they need to be taken out of our schools immediately. There isn't a child in the world that needs the threat of violence hanging over their head when they are there to learn. Sky says, I don't think putting all kids that bully into one school is the answer. That's just going to create a pack mentality. And Scott says, yes, there is something fundamentally wrong with a child who can inflict this sort of violence on another. This sort of risk needs to be eliminated from the school environment completely and dealt with. And Shelley, that's just awful to watch that video.
It actually made me feel ill when I saw it. And when you read into it a bit more, this bullying has been going on for 3 years between these two girls. So imagine, even for both of them to be going through that for 3 years, the school should have stepped in earlier. We need zero tolerance on violence. We need zero tolerance on bullying. And it really disturbs me that it's the girl-on-girl violence that seems to be really on the increase at the moment. So I think it's not suitable to have one person put into a separate school and all the bullies go to one school. That seems weird. I think it needs to be that every school just clamps down, and we just need to have a simple rule. No one hits anyone. The end.
Yeah, I thought that this had been addressed. We've got education campaigns, we're aware of it. Tom, what do you think? Should there be a separate school?
Later, it scares me. As a parent, sending my kids off to school at the moment, it's the one fear that I have, that, are they going to come home and not even talk about it? That's an even greater fear. And if it was happening to my child, it would make my blood boil. It's a really scary prospect. That said, I don't think you can send kids at 12 years of age to a separate school. What message are we sending there? There has to be some kind of recourse for education. We can't just, throw out the key and, say to these kids, well, you're done for, that's it. There has to be some kind of education message. As Shelley said, it's got to be zero tolerance. We have got to really drum into them. This isn't acceptable because, kids aren't a lost cause at age 12, but we need to get into them pretty quickly that this is wrong. We just don't going to tolerate it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see the schools comment on it. Tom Wren, Shelley Horton, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just ahead, off to see the Wizard.